So, yet again, I recorded a video without sound. This time, I caught it before I posted it, but it's aggravating because part of the point of this is not to have to redo these sorts of things, is to just, let them fly as however they go. And of course, well, I'm not going to be doing that now because that one didn't work. So, this is a new Starbucks in Madisonville, Kentucky that just opened a couple of days ago. Earlier there was an hour and a half wait for a drink, so it was pretty damn busy. Um, Interestingly enough, I'm the only one here who has brought anything like a laptop or a book or, you know, so people are not really doing that here. So, well, what can we say today? Hard to say exactly. Doing this in a public place is interesting because, people watch and people, haven't had anybody really interrupt or anything like that, haven't anybody pay too much attention, but I wonder if they know what I'm doing. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Here, maybe not as much. This Madisonville, Kentucky is a bit more of a sleepier, less progressive kind of place than Evansville and even Henderson, which is, across the river from Evansville. So, this is, I think, a little more, to tell you the truth, I was kind of surprised that Starbucks moved in here, and I was kind of surprised how popular it was. But apparently it's been insanely popular. So, anyway, so what I've been doing with my time these days is I did start that John Fosse book that I said I was going to start, and I can't really say much about it yet. I'm only 35 pages into it, not exactly a decent start, let's say, but not exactly a big chunk. Book is about 650, 670 pages long, something like that. So less than, I don't know, less than 1/10, way less than 1/10, less than 1/5 maybe of the book. So the one notable thing stylistically is it's very much unique in that it's all basically one big huge sentence that's broken up. Now, Faulkner did this a little bit in one of his stories, The Bear, I think it was, has like a 10-page sentence. And if I'm not mistaken, Jose Saramago and The Blindness did something like this. And of course, other authors over time have played around with these kind of techniques. Is it William Gaddis in J.R., or his other big book whose name is The Recognitions? I think one of the two of them was largely one sentence or had some aspects of that in it. Even in Thomas Pynchon's The Gravity's Rainbow, which I read and enjoyed quite a bit, there are some moments that have kind of this feel to it. Not the whole book, but there are some moments that do. And I've read other things by Fosse. I have 3 of his texts. I have Septology, which is the large book, the one I'm reading now, and I have 2 shorter works whose names escape me. And I've read one of the 2 shorter books, and it dealt with a very similar kind of melancholic look back at life approach, but was much shorter and much more compact. And it had a similar kind of stylistic oddity, and that it was all one sentence. So at this point, I am going to assume that this is a technique that Fosse often applies. And of course, this becomes an issue when you're dealing with translation, because what does this look like in the original translation? How does this read in the original translation? In English, we do have grammar rules about comma splices, about just joining random phrases together, that you do that enough, and you basically wind up with a comma splice, you wind up with an error. And this isn't necessarily true in other languages, even closely related languages. I know in French, the rules about how to bind 2 or more clauses into one sentence is a little bit different. I can't really say exactly how different, but I do know that there are places reading things like Proust and whatnot, where you'll see several clauses put together in a way that would be considered an error in English, but apparently is not in French. And of course, this is translated from the French. So it's English, so it is an error in the English, but and the same thing's true of Jane Austen, who of course wrote in English, but 250 years ago. Her work, well, 250 years ago, 210 years ago, 210 years ago, to be more accurate. And her work, there are moments that read very much like a comma splice, but are not in her time period because the exact rules have changed. Now, of course, with all of these texts, you have an editing that happens. You have an editing from whatever Jane Austen's, well, no manuscripts exist. Whatever text they're taking the text of her book from, whatever text that is, has been edited and updated. So spelling errors have been quietly corrected. Minor grammatical errors have been quietly corrected. In fact, it's been speculated by some that some of Austen's style, some of the precision of her style, comes entirely from editing from the manuscripts, which we don't have, into the first editions. Now, I have no idea. There's an element of that attitude that almost sounds like sexist, like, oh, this woman could not have written these perfect sentences by herself. She needed the help of a professional editor. Well, maybe. Who knows? I have seen some Faulkner manuscripts typed. He typed his manuscripts, and how editors did, in fact, correct some of what Faulkner was doing. So, some of what you see in the style of an author doesn't come straight from the author. Some of it comes from that editing process, that process of making it into a text for consumption. And of course, you do it with another language, you have quite a bit of opportunity for this. Sometimes in a foreign language, because the rules are a little bit different, sections will be broken up differently. In fact, there are places in some translations where entire paragraphs have been rearranged. Like instead of going paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, as it does in the original, it'll go paragraph 1, paragraph 3, paragraph 2 in the English version. Now, why? Well, we organize thought differently. We organize ideas differently. We organize reality differently. And most of the time, it's close enough. Most of the time, it's similar enough. But every once in a while, a moment will arise where the order they might do it in another language is confusing to the way we do it in ours. I remember many, many years ago when I was in a French literature class, we were reading A Simple Heart by Guy de Maupassant. And in A Simple Heart, there is a passage where a bull, I think, breaks into a field, or anyway, there's a passage with a bull, and it's a little bit dangerous and exciting. I can't remember exactly what happens. It's been forever since I've read that story, and I've only ever read it in French. So, and my French wasn't that great. So how much did I really understand? Maybe I never really knew this story. I don't know. But there's a moment where there's this bull, and in that moment, Guy de Maupassant makes a choice to switch verb tenses to a verb tense that you wouldn't use in English. Now, I forget exactly what tense he moved from, but he moved from the literary past, which you normally use, like, he was, I was, things like that in English and French. He moved from that into another tense that's more immediate, I think a present tense. And that is a stylistic thing you can do in French that is, you can't replicate it in English. So however that passage is translated into English, they would not make that same choice because that choice would read as stylistically inept in English. But in French, it is not. And that's just one very, very, very simple example. But these sorts of choices happen all the time. So, in, I think, Norwegian, that Fosse writes in, I think it's Norwegian. I'll check on that. I think it's Norwegian. Maybe this kind of writing is not as extreme and as antithetical to grammar rules as it is in English. In English, I think in both, sentences that go on for, 600 pages are unusual. I don't think this is a normal stylistic thing in Norwegian, but maybe it fits the grammar rules better, and is something that can be done there in a way that in English it just sticks out like, okay, this is stylistically odd. Anyway, but more on that book later. For now, like, subscribe, all that stuff if you care to, comment if you care to, enjoy.